Hello there and welcome to this vlog of May 2022. Now this video is going to be about new project management ideas for the next Kickstarter, or Wave 3 as I think some people are going to be calling it. Now this will be split into two. So the first section is going to be on how I'm going to incorporate my project management ideas to my Mercenary unit, the Dusk Counters. And the second bit is going to be on like the wider project, because I'm actually going to create quite a few mercenary forces. So hopefully this will prompt you and give you some ideas, and in good time as well, because the Kickstarter has not yet formally been announced. I'd imagine it will be with us around August or September. So it's good at the moment to be thinking about, what you want to do going forward, what kind of forces you want to collect. That's certainly what I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. And I love this part of the hobby. I love the project management side of it. Important to say as well that this is, or the first part of this video is almost like a second part to a video that I did a few months ago, which was how to create your mercenary battalion. And I went into quite a lot of depth on there in regards to the Dusk Counters battalion and how I tied it all together with the lore and made it as accurate as possible. Accuracy being the key word there. Because obviously you can do what the hell you want if you are creating anything in BattleTech. I mean, you can just decide that lances are 3 mechs and 2 vehicles if you want. That's up to you. But because this is like a public channel, for want of a better expression, and I think people do like to have accurate advice, or not that I'm entirely accurate, because I'm sure there are some errors in here in the lore that I'm not familiar with, because BattleTech's huge. But it's good, I think, for people to know that, there are 12 mechs in a company, there are 3 companies in a battalion, there are 4 companies in a reinforced battalion, things like that allow you to get into the mindset of creating things correctly and accurately as far as the lore stands. Because I think people want that as well. I don't think people want the whole, yeah man, just do what you want, because it's fun to be accurate, in my opinion anyway. Especially I look at it like the creators of BattleTech created a really cool sandbox for us to play in. So why am I going to go into that sandbox and take all the sand out and fill it with water, right? You can do that, but I think it kind of defeats the point. So like I said, I'm going to discuss in the first part of this video how I've turned the Dusk Counters now into a regiment, because of course I have. That was pretty inevitable. I think at one point of time I was like, I'll just get the company. Then I was like, I'll just get the battalion, and now I'm obviously at the regiment level. However, the final, or the third battalion for the Dusk Counters, a lot of it is just on paper. So it's like aerotech units and artillery, things that I actually use the card-based system for, so I don't actually need the models. So it's not as horrific as it sounds in regards expense and storage and work and all that kind of stuff. It's more as a reality, it's 2 battalions plus a company, basically. But for paper's sake and to keep it official, I've actually created it as 3 battalions. Now, this is the next part I'm going to make is really important, and it's something that I didn't actually make in the first battalion build that I did for the Dusk Counters, and I probably should have done. So I'll say it now before I forget. When you're creating a company in BattleTech, and everything is really structured around the company, obviously the lance is kind of the smallest group of units, but the company's kind of where it's at, because that's 3 lances, and that's usually where I think people will go. So, if you, for instance, if you're not interested in spending thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars on a full battalion, if you just kind of play BattleTech maybe a bit casually and you just want the models and a few to paint up, I think going for a company is a really good idea. This is obviously an extension of that, but I've separated it all out into companies. But it's really important to note on the company that it doesn't have to be 12 mechs. You can have, you could have a lance with 3 mechs and 1 air support. You could have another lance of 2 mechs and 2 tanks. The Capellans actually do something very good quite early on in BattleTech, in that they create the augmented lances, where it's basically 4 mechs and 2 vehicles, Really good idea, very effective. Typical like Capellan ingenuity, because they probably just saw like a gap in the market to get more things in a battlefield, as opposed to kind of the restrictive lance, to give them a little bit extra support. So sounds very Capellan to me anyway. They usually have quite good ideas like on the battlefield and in mech design and things like that. So there are like different things you can do. You don't just have to keep it to mechs. I could have easily done that in here as well. For instance, if we're looking at like the first Dusk Counters as earlier company there, I could have just had like an entire lance of air support and then used air support, again in the card system I use, but it's there because it exists in the first company. I went in a different direction though. All my kind of what I call my reinforced primary battalion. A reinforced battalion is basically 4 companies. It's modelled after the Star League Defence Force system. What I've done though is the primary battalion is just mechs. Now that's just my like creative take on it. That's not accurate in terms of how an actual like BattleTech military would operate. You usually would find that you'd have like recon units and artillery units and things like that scattered throughout the companies, which is standard for military. That's how they usually operate. The only way that I've done it, though, the way that I've done it is that I've mine's like chronological. So you can see there like Kismet Lance, which is the first lance of the Dusk Counters. That's very much like a 30-25 lance. Apart from the Lancelot, that is a Star League Lancelot, but that's for narrative reasons. But they're kind of, an Enforcer, Wolverine, a Catapult mechs that you generally find in and around the area of space that they are from. So kind of tied into the lore. Whereas, like, if you go into the second battalion, you can see that the Discus Lance here is a Cyclops, a Longbow, a Grasshopper, and a Cataphract. That's because they end up in 3029 in the St. Ives. They get contracted to train, like the St. Ives militia, on how to fight Capellans in case the invasion comes, because they just split up from the Capellans at that time. And the Dusk Counters are kind of a dab hand at fighting Capellans because they're from the Capellan March. So that's, they've been brought in as like a third party to train their people. And they end up like commandeering this lance from the Capellans. So it's like through a bit of mischief, they end up getting access to a really nice lance there. And in 3029, that is super powerful. Like especially the Cataphract, that is very much new tech at the time. The Grasshopper to me is probably the best mech of the Succession era. It's absolutely brilliant. It's basically, it runs cool. It's got I think you can only generate I played with it recently, so it's kind of a little bit fresh in my mind. I think it generates 22 heat on an Alpha Strike, or maybe even 20 heat on an Alpha Strike. And so you basically, you can, and it's got 20 plus heat sinks, just singles as well. So you can jump around and shoot with that, energy weaponry, all day, and you barely generate any heat. And it's a really tough mech. It's got really good armor. So on tabletop, the Grasshopper is very, very crunchy. But like I said, to get back to point, I specifically have those mechs there because that would be seen as very much like a cutting-edge Capellan lance in 3029. The Cyclops especially is a mech that you associate with the Capellans. I associate the Longbow with it as well. I think the Longbow is probably more a mech that you would associate with the Free Worlds League, but for me it's the Capellans as well. The Grasshopper and the Cataphract are definitely, not exclusively Capellan mechs, but mechs that they certainly have access to. So I talked about that in the first video, and how to kind of world build and force build, and almost live vicariously through your mercenary unit as time goes on. What I've done now, though, because I've split it out into a regiment, into 3 different battalions, I've specifically done that because when we kind of know now that we're getting new mechs, and they're doing mechs into the post-clan invasion up into the Fedcom Civil War. So we're getting things like, the Penetrator. We're getting a lot of mechs from that era that are really quite powerful new tech into from the 3050s. Which is great. I kind of thought that's the direction they're going as well. And obviously, that's still within the confines of where I play BattleTech. So obviously I wanted some of those in the Dusk Counters force. So I've just kind of remodeled it and extended out the battalion to a regiment. Previously, I had I had a reinforced battalion, but it was almost nearly a regiment anyway, because I had a really big command and control section of the battalion, which was in its own right, maybe 20 mechs and 10 vehicles. So now it's actually more accurate. So this is a good time to actually do this video, because I think going forward this will be like the blueprint that I use, whereas I think everything up to this point has me just been trying to get up to regiment level. I just needed the excuse to do it. So the first four companies which are in the reinforced primary battalion, if you want to, it's basically not changed much since the first video. So you can, if you so wish, go and find my video on how to build a mercenary battalion, and you'll see it in there. It's changed a little bit, but I think on the whole it's really remained quite the same. The only, like, I suppose, what I'll do, I'll put it simple. What I'll do is I'll go through each company very quickly and just talk about them. So I've kind of done the Azalea Company and Bandolera Company already. So we'll skip over that just for the sake of brevity. The third company, though, is quite a late era for me company, and that's basically Celestial Company, which is a clan company. So all these mechs are clans. I've written quite a bit of, like, when I was like a teenager, I wrote quite a bit of fiction for the Dusk Counters and how they dupe a clan smoke Jaguar star into being their bondsman. So they end up getting these like really powerful mechs in 3050 and fighting the clans with them. It's to me, that will always be the heart of BattleTech, the clan invasion, because that's when I came into it. I know for people who are older than I, they'll always say Succession Wars, but for me, the clan invasion's quite a magical time when, you know, and like the fulfillment of prophecy of the SLDF coming back. So in terms of narrative and play, especially now, because they've done so much to kind of equalise the playing field between the Innisphere and the clans, that it's much easier to play. When I was young, it was like the clans just dominated everything. They were so crunchy on tabletop, whereas now, and now that I'm older and more experienced, I've done videos about this on how you can kind of nerf the clans a little bit to kind of, you know, make them equal to the Innisphere. The fourth company is the Scout Company. This is Daredevil Company. That's really a force that develops outside of the three kind of primary companies of the 1st Battalion. They have like basically a recon unit quite early on in that, which is Moloch Lancer, which is the Sentinel, the Jenna, the Spider, and the Mercury. But then they gradually add to that as things go on, as time goes on, to a point where these are actually there are 4 vehicles in this company, so 2 Drillsons and 2 Saladins. So this, I'd probably say that the 4th company is actually about as accurate as you get in terms of how a company would look in BattleTech, you know, with those 4 vehicles and 8 light recon mechs, or scout mechs, whatever you want to call them. So next up we got the 2nd Battalion, which is the Command and Specialist. Again, a lot of this you'll have seen already if you watched that previous video on how to build a mercenary battalion. But you can see I've developed this a little bit, because originally my command battalion was just the what I call the glorious 331st. There's quite a fun story behind that. I mean, I won't go into vast detail, but the Dusk Counters really look out and they find like an old Lost Tech Star League ship that's from the 331st Division, which eventually are the people who become Clan Wolverine in the lore. And when they find out during the clan invasion that the clans hate Clan Wolverine and they've got 4 mechs that were from that particular armed force, you know, as almost like a great trolling exercise, they actually put like, and I've done this on the painted mechs, they've got like Clan Wolverine insignia all over the mech just to really like upset the clans. Like a ghost has come back to haunt them. And the original mechs from it are the Atlas II, the Night Star, the Highlander, and the Black Knight. They eventually supplement that and create it into a demi-company with a Kodiak, because I had to have a Kodiak. The new model looks so amazing. And a Rifleman as well, because I do like this variant of the Rifleman, which is the RFL-5M. So that's the glorious 331st, all named after some of the like iconic people in BattleTech as well, because why not? Sometimes you've got to be a little bit crunchy and silly, right? But I've supplemented that and turned it into a proper company by actually putting in a C3 network, which I'm amazed that I gave myself the permission to do this, because I usually hate all the modern electronic stuff. But recently, somebody came over to my house and we played a game, and they played with a C3 network, and they quite badly beat me with it, actually. It's really quite a powerful electronic system. It looks on the surface of it like it was created as a way for the Inner Sphere to kind of get some kind of equilibrium with the clans, because it is powerful electronics, and I think it's predominantly seen as a Draconis combine system. And I've represented that as well in the mechs here. So you can see in the Master and Slaves, which are listed here, there's a Cyclops, which is the Master system, and then there's the Hatamoto, Chia Grand Dragon, and the Spider, which are the Slave systems. It's actually, I don't mind it. Now I've kind of read about it. It's not overtly complex. It's quite easy. It just gives you like a beneficial range modifier for a spotter. I'm not going to go into it. If you're interested in that, then there'll be, you can find it, I think, on Sana. It tells you the exact rules, or there'll be a website somewhere that does it. Or if you've got the books, obviously, in Total Warfare, it goes into detail on that. That's where I got the data from. And I also supplement it with a couple more mechs as well. And these were mechs that I really wanted, but couldn't fit them into like the actual Prime Battalion or the 1st Battalion. So that was an Awesome and a Thunderbolt. The Awesome, I did a video which it garnered quite a bit of debate, and some people give me a little bit of heat, which is fine, because I think the title of the video was "The Victory is Better Than the Awesome, Fight Me," so they decided to fight me. Great. And I always said that now when I kind of did a playtest with it, I really did prefer the Victor as an 80-ton mech as opposed to the Awesome 80-ton mech. I thought the Awesome was overrated. However, I did specifically say in that video that when the when the Lost Tech era comes back and Inner Sphere powers are able to put like double heat sinks on mechs and ERPPCs and things like that, then that variant of the Awesome there, which is the AWS Mark 9 MA, is an incredible monster. Like, it doesn't suffer any of the tactical problems that the regular like Succession Wars Awesome has. So I really wanted that variant in. So that's a good kind of opportunity to get it in there. It's also important to note that variant of the Awesome has like a command lance module or an extra cockpit or something like that. I can't remember what the exact terminology is. So I've put the Dusk Counters officer in there, so that even though there's the Master Slave system at hand, there is a Dusk Counters officer in that cockpit. It's a dual cockpit, so they might have like someone else in there on some kind of mission, like a specialist or whatever. So it is actually a mech that you can argue is a command mech. So great. And then the Thunderbolt. Now, the reason I really wanted this Thunderbolt is because it was through the Hairbrain Scheme game, I called the Thunderbolt in that Diablo, and it's a really, really good mech to use as like a heat platform. So you can get in there and you can attach loads of Inferno missiles and flamers and things like that and just heat the enemy. It's a very good chassis on which to do that tactic. And I really like the Thunderbolt, the TDR Mark 9S, which is quite a late era Thunderbolt in terms of where I play BattleTech. It's basically got flamers on there. So I was like, ooh, I love the Thunderbolt anyway, and I'd like the model for the Dusk Counters, so I'll fit one of them in there. So that was a nice opportunity for me to get one of those in. Next up, and I'm going to have to talk about the colour codes here so you know what's going on. Where a model is black, it means that I own the model already. So nice and simple. Where it's red, it means that I've decided I'm going to buy that box set. So you can see here, for instance, there is the Night Sky. The Night Sky is a model that is in the Kellhound's Lance, I think. Pretty sure that's right. So I know, for instance, that I'm going to be wanting to buy 2 of those. So I'm going to have 2 Night Skies for sure, because they've advertised it already that that's what you get in the box. Where it's this kind of like mucky brown colour is where I know that there's a mech potentially in a box. Like the mech is in a box set that I'm not sure if I can get it in the Kickstarter or like where it's going to appear. So for instance, we know we're getting a Star Slayer. I really want the Star Slayer. But I don't know what box it's going to be in. So I just know that when whatever box that is in, I'll just buy it and I'll get the Star Slayer out, and hopefully the other mechs that are in there in that box, I might have them in other forces, or if not, I can just sell them or give them away or whatever. So that's the colour system, just if you were wondering. So this is actually my favourite new company that I've been able to create here. And this is the Advanced Tech Company. So these are all mechs that are either like the New Wave mechs. You can see that's the demi company name of the first one here, which is New Wave. And then we've got Overhaul. And I think you can guess what this means. New Wave are basically all those mechs that come in after 3050. So all these mechs, like the Berserker, I think, is a 3056 mech. Actually, that's when you can get access to that mech in the lore. Whereas the Overhaul demi company are mechs that have been around for years, but have got like a really powerful refit. So, for instance, the Griffin there. This is the GRF 3M, which is a really powerful variant of the Griffin. The original Griffin, I never really like that much. You know, the one with the PPC and the LRM-10, it's a bit meh. That variant, though, is really good. I think it, just from memory, I think it has an LRM-20 and an ERPPC and a small laser. It just fits a lot on there. So they've obviously, you know, they've got a lot of extra tonnage there with better engines and, you know, might even have like the enhanced armor and like the endo steel and stuff like that. I'm not sure of the exact specs, but I know that I liked it when I saw it a few weeks ago. So I was like, ooh, I'd like a Griffin in the Dusk Counters force as well. So I'll fit that in there. The Vindicator, gotta have a Vindicator. We know we are getting the Vindicator and the Griffin in the starter set, but I've kind of listed these two as like that dirty brown colour at the moment because that might be available like next year. It might be available sooner than that. I'm not too sure. So I've just kind of kept it like ambiguous at the moment. I know I will get it because I really want a Vindicator, but we'll see. Not much more to talk about. I mean, I'm not going to go through and give a full synopsis of every mech there, but they are super powerful demi companies, and it's nice as well because you're getting into that Fedcom Civil War era, and there's so much like clan tech and enhanced tech. I think if you're playing on tabletop, it's good to have like, especially like the Devastator, which is a really, really powerful mech. Interesting that I got that wrong in my predictions. I thought it was a Templar that they were making in the video that I did a couple of weeks ago. I was delighted when somebody informed me that I was wrong because the Devastator is a far superior mech to the Templar. The only thing that I was slightly miffed about was that I thought that by getting the Templar we'd get like a run on the new on the Innisphere Omni-Mechs, which I'm quite keen to get. Things like the Menshen, which is a Capellan mech, which is an Innisphere Omni-Mech. I thought we might be getting that, but now it's like, oh, there are actually no, or not that has been announced yet anyway, there are no Innisphere Omni-Mechs available. So that's one negative, but generally speaking, way better to get the Devastator. It's such a good mech. The next battalion, which is the final battalion, this is the one where most of it doesn't exist. So you can see here that like the second company and the third company is just air support and munitions, which is basically like mine layers, artillery, things like that. And then there's the logistics company. So I do actually have a couple of loader mechs that are in the Dusk Counters force. But that's got things like, you know, loader VTOLs, transport supply helicopters, medical rescue, stuff like that. So I've condensed that into the kind of supplementary forces, which, you know, that's just a creative decision on my part. You don't necessarily get it that way in a military, but just to kind of flood out the, you know, the battalion, the regiment fully. And because I don't necessarily want that many more mechs, I'm not like, oh, I've got to have another, you know, 2 companies within that battalion, because I've got pretty much everything I want now. In fact, I don't think there are any mechs that I'm like, oh, I really wanted that for the Dusk Counters, but can't get. With like the Vindicator, the Awesome, the Thunderbolt, it's kind of, and the Banshee as well, that was in there. That's a mech that I was after getting. I've kind of scratched that itch now, so I'm happy to kind of keep that on paper as opposed to keeping it in as real models. But it's the first this first company here which is worthy of some talk, because we are straight away getting the 2 quads. So I really want the Goliath and the Scorpion in there. I've always been a bit of a secret fan of the quad mechs. They're not the best on tabletop, but I fit them in. I kind of look at quads a little bit differently. To me, they're more vehicles as they are mechs, because, you know, like they're like all-purpose terrain. I know they are technically mechs. They have all the same kind of idiosyncrasies that mechs have. But for me, I wanted to put them in the support lands, because I wouldn't necessarily tie them into the, you know, like a mech company or lance. They're there for specialist things. Like, for me, the Scorpion is a mech that you use across rough terrain. So if you were on a mission where you knew you were going to be taking a lot of piloting skill roll checks, good to have a Scorpion, because it's got 4 legs, so it can obviously manage walking across rough terrain a lot better than most bipedal mechs. Next up, and this is kind of a new thing that I put in there, that I've just put like a garrison. Well, it's a lance and then a demi company. But I had a rule on this. I didn't want any mech higher than 50 tons. So you see there's a Centurion in there. But that was it. I didn't want any like high end stuff or assault mechs in here or anything, because I'm going to run it that like the Dusk Counters, who eventually become a relatively competent, especially now I've been able to fill them out to the regiment. They're going to need like new mech warriors coming through on the books as mech warriors leave or die or get injured or whatever. So they've got like their own cadet company within there, and it's basically like, I mean, it's a Centurion, a Hatchet Man, a Blackjack, an Irby, a Piranha, and a Locust. And I really like that, because it gives like it gives me opportunity in a narrative sense to get some real time training for like the younger people within the Dusk Counters or the cadets, and it's quite a useful thing to have as well. You know, if you were doing a mission where you needed, like, for want of a better term, how the clans would say, it's second line mechs that you kind of keep back from the action and maybe do like some defensive positioning on a location while the actual like real force go out and do all the heavy lifting. It just gives you a good option, and it's a good opportunity to kind of get the cadets into the kind of story arcs or whatever else it is I decide to do with the Dusk Counters. So that's them. That's the regiment as is at the moment. That may expand or change. It may change as well when we find out more about the Kickstarter and what box sets are coming up, because I might not be able to do it exactly as I want to do it. So it may be that I have to go back and change a few things. But now onto the real kind of like focus of this video, which is really on the mercenary forces. Now, I was toying with creating mercenary forces for the last year, but I decided instead, when the second wave Kickstarter all came through, and I've been able to supplement that with a lot more mechs, obviously, I really wanted the vanilla generic forces. So I wanted all the inner sphere powers, I wanted all the kind of major clans, I wanted some periphery powers, vehicles, things like that. Now all that's done. The mercenary forces are very specific to BattleTech, obviously. But to me, they are the beating heart of BattleTech, because that's what a lot of the stories and the books are based around. Because I think it's just way more interesting to talk about, you know, crazy characters who are like really, you know, like very, very interesting people and a bit crazy to go and create a mercenary unit, which costs a lot of money. And so it means, by definition, they're going to have like really like quirky character traits, and that is seen a lot in BattleTech. You know, whether it's like Natasha Kerensky or, you know, I suppose the Kells as well. You know, the people that have got like dynamism and ambition. Whereas within like the inner sphere powers or the clan's power militaries, it's a bit like, well, yeah, you get people like that for sure, but they're not crazy enough to go and create their own like mercenary outfits, and it's just like you can literally have everything taken away from you like that. Whereas opposed to, you know, if you're in like the Lyran Commonwealth and you're in a company that gets destroyed but you still make it and you're alive, well, you'll just get put into another company or you'll get retired so you can get your pension. More complex with mercenaries, like even though they're their own bosses, it's very risky. So the first one I'm going to collect, I'll just go through each one and talk about the mechs that I've kind of assigned to each one. So I really wanted the Northwind Highlanders. They have their own box coming out, so I really am pleased to be able to do that. One thing that surprised me a little bit is they didn't redesign the Gala Glass. So I went recently and bought the old model for that. It's a character in the Northwind Highlanders that I really like. That's Colonel William McLeod. He's kind of late era for me, so he's kind of involved post like clan invasion. He becomes quite a prominent character. There's a book about him as well from the 90s that I remember reading years ago. I've tried to keep all the forces as like specific as possible to that force. So, for instance, the Highlanders, obviously they love the Highlander mech, so they've got a Highlander mech. There's as well like I've gone into their master list, but I've expanded it out a little bit in terms of how I feel the Northwind Highlanders would look. Because remember, the Northwind Highlanders are huge. So you've got here, like, for instance, there's a Raven in there. Why? Because the Northwind Highlanders are very much affiliated with the Capellans and the kind of succession wars. So I'm like, well, they'd know what's going on there and they'd get access to mechs like that. And it's just good as a light mech with options. It's got like the early electronic equipment on there and things like that. But generally speaking, the Northwind Highlanders to me are like, there's an Axeman and a Hatchetman in there because they're quite a feisty group. I mean, they're Scottish orientated, so they wouldn't be like, on the outskirts shooting in usually. Although they do have that option because there's a blackjack in there. But, generally speaking, they're a unit that likes to kind of, get a bit punchy. Next up, we've got the Hansen's Rough Riders, who are a very fun mercenary unit. They also have their own box set coming out. So that's I think we'll try and remember what you get in there. You get the Atlas, the Penetrator. I can't remember the other two off the top of my head. But very much a mercenary outfit that I associate with the Lyran Commonwealth. Hence the big assault mechs there. They're kind of noted for that as well. They love their big assaults and heavies. So I've tried to reflect that here. One thing that I've done that's slightly different from how the Hansen's Rough Riders would usually operate is I have put light mechs in there because I don't want any force just to have like full assault options, because that's just boring and it might not be appropriate. Like I might need them to be at a lesser like battle value level if I'm playing like a narrative game, or I want to play them in a competitive game or something, so that's why I've given them options. I've just seen something that needs some description. There's actually a blank space here. I've purposely kept like some blanks in here, which you'll see as we go through. That's because I can basically supplement them out with any spare mechs when I've got the Kickstarter. So just so you're aware, that's why. Next up, we got the Kellhound, so one of the most famous mercenary units in BattleTech. They're obviously doing the box set here, so a lot of this is from there. So the Night Sky, for instance, that fits in there very nicely. Generally speaking, though, the Kellhounds are a massive, massive mercenary group. I've kind of got a rule as well that every one of my mercenary companies, whether it's in the Dusk Counters or these, they all need at least one old model in there. I've done that specifically because I like giving Ralpar for money. So in this case, it's the Merlin. Quite it's a late Succession War era mech. Quite interesting as well. Interesting looking mech. So I thought I'd get one of those. I've kind of tied this to characters as well. So I should have said really that Hansen's Rough Riders actually have Colonel Gerard Hansen. He's traditionally in the Cyclops, so that's why they get a Cyclops. For the Kellhounds, one of the most famous mechs in BattleTech, he's Colonel Morgan Kell's Archer. His brother as well, Patrick Kell, he pilots a Thunderbolt, but he dies quite early. He dies in like the 3020s, if memory serves me correctly. And then there's the Wolfhound 2C, which is the Grinner, which Phelan Patrick Kell pilots. Quite a late era mech. It's like post-clan invasion. Now, I've got quite a few spare Wolfhounds, and I'm quite happy just to use one of those as the Grinner. There is actually a specialist mech you can get that Catalyst released. It's one of the mechs that you can like assemble because it's all in different parts. I might try and get that, but ultimately, it's that variant of the Wolfhound looks exactly the same as a regular Wolfhound. It's got like the three. I think it upgrades M lasers to M pulses in the centre, so it's then got the rear extended range M laser. And then it's got an L laser on its right arm, I think. It might have like an ERL laser on or something like that. But what I'm trying to get at is, as WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. It's the same as a regular Wolfhound. So I don't know why I'm going to necessarily go and try to find that variant. So I'm quite happy just to give a regular Wolfhound. However, if I can get hold of the 2C, I'll probably use that. Next up, we got the Grey Death Legion, who are personally my favourite mercenary outfit in BattleTech. They are the most like indie. They're the coolest. Grayson Carlisle, I love that guy's style. He's just like, to me, he's like the most important character in BattleTech. I know it's debatable. There are numerous characters you could throw out and say they're the most important, but to me, it's Grayson Carlisle. You can see that so many of the mechs here are actually tied into the lore. So Grayson actually starts in a Marauder. He eventually migrates up to a Victor. So I've got those two ready. He's then got a Command Lance, and I really wanted that Command Lance on tabletop. So obviously the Victor's kind of separate because that's a mech that he uses later on when he kind of migrates up to an assault mech. But his early level Command Lance is a Marauder, a Griffin, a Rifleman, and a Wolverine. And then there's his girlfriend, later wife, who is Laurie Calamar. and she famously pilots a Locust and a Shadowhawk. So the majority of the Grey Death Legion are characters in terms of the company that I'm building for them. They're one of the few forces that I could be persuaded to do more than a company for. So I could be persuaded to do one battalion for the Grey Death Legion, but at the moment, no. At the moment, a company is fine. You know, for instance, I wouldn't be doing a battalion for the Hanson's Rough Riders because they're great and they're fun, but I'm not that invested in them. Whereas the Grey Death Legion, I absolutely love. One little note: I won't actually be buying the Grey Death Legion box set because, well, it's, and I'm completely fine with Catalyst doing this. It's a lance. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, I think it is a lance, isn't it? It's 4 Mechs. So, it's like a very late era. So it's like 3150, which is not something I've got any investment in with BattleTech in that era. And it's kind of like the Grey Death Legion get brought back, and I think the leader of the Grey Death Legion then pilot a Gargoyle, I think. Which is a clan mech, but I don't want any of the mechs in there. I'm saying that I could use them, but it's got like a K2 catapult in there, and I despise the K2 catapult. It ruins perfection for me. So I'm not interested in having like a Gargoyle which plays outside of my era, or a K2 catapult. If I did get a K2 catapult, I'd just give it to the Cretan forces because they are the only force that, in my eyes, that would be low enough to use such an abysmal mech. Next up, we have got the Waco Rangers, who, if the Grey Death Legion are my favourite like core unit in our mercenary unit in BattleTech, in terms of there's so much lore around them and they're so important, the Waco Rangers are like my favourite indie band. I love the Waco Rangers. They were the first mercenary unit that really made me fall in love with BattleTech. When I remember getting the early like Mercenaries book, it must have been back in the early 90s. And it had like a full description of the Waco Rangers, and they inspired a lot of what the Dusk Counters actually became in terms of how I wrote for them when I was a teenager. They're very quirky. They're very fun. I've gone for the full. I've gone for a company, but I've gone to actually mimic the full command lance for them. So that's Colonel Wayne Waco in the Battlemaster. Then traditionally he runs with a Cyclops, a Marauder, and a Wasp, who are basically his command lance. I really wanted their force to be a little bit middling, so I didn't want to like flood it with assault mechs. I really wanted like medium mechs and light mechs in there. I think this is all accurate. In fact, I know it's all accurate because I've checked the book that I've got from the mercenary unit. So, for instance, like, it's not 100% accurate because I've not created their force verbatim, because that would mean I have to get vehicles and artillery, which I don't want to do. So they do, for instance, have a Crusader, a Centurion, a Trebuchet, an Enforcer, a Jenner, a Panther, an Irby mech. You know, all these mechs they do have access to. Next up, we got the Wolf's Dragoons. Some more mechs, obviously, to find for these, but at the moment, I think there are 12 there at the moment. Now, I'm going to do a 15 force here, so it's a little bit outside the regular company, because they are in effect a clan force, and they do operate in those like multiples of 5. So what I've decided to do, I did 5 Omni-Mechs, which gives you the start, and then there are 10 like regular like Inner Sphere mechs. Again, 3 of them haven't been decided upon here. I wanted to use mechs that are, for want of a better term, like very synonymous with that 30-50 era, that clan invasion era. So you can see there's like a Summoner, there's a Mad Dog, a Firemoth, a Warhawk, a Timberwolf. You know, I didn't want any of the late era stuff in there. I don't want the like a clan mech that was built in 3059 or something like that. I wanted it to be that clan invasion era. So they're all like really like archetypal Omni-Mechs. And especially, well, for Jamie Wolf especially, he does actually pilot a Summoner for a time. Traditionally, though, he is in the Archer. That's his mech of choice when they're in the Inner Sphere. Obviously, I'm sure you know this. You probably know a lot more about BattleTech than I do. But the Wolf's Dragoons are a clan force that gets sent on like an expedition to the Inner Sphere to do some scouting before the invasion happens in 3050. So they actually get into the Inner Sphere quite early on, and it's huge. It's like this ridiculously powerful force that just appears from nowhere, and everyone in the Inner Sphere is like, what is that? Like, they've come up with all this like amazing Starlink tech, which to the clans was all like really outdated tech because they'd enhanced that and created Omni-Mechs and better technology. But for the Inner Sphere, they were like, my God, where did these guys come from? So you thought more questions would have been asked really when he rocked up with that. It's like I don't know, it's like the equivalent of like in the US, suddenly like this amazing force just appears that have got technology that's like 50 years in front of us, and they're like, hi, we'll fight for you now. It's like, who are you? So, but whatever, it's fiction, so that's fine. Now, it's not just the Wolf Dragoons core that I'm doing. I'm going to be doing the Black Widow Company. I'm so excited to do this. It's something like this is something I would have done anyway, but the fact they're doing the Mercenary unit, or the Mercenary box sets, like they've already done the Wolf Dragoons, obviously, just going to be so fun to do this because I get to create like Natasha Kerensky's lance, and later on hers. Not necessarily going to do her style like verbatim, but like having the like the Direwolf in there, which is her like specific mech. I've actually just sent that away to get commissioned. It's such an iconic mech for Natasha Kerensky. I'll paint the Warhammer myself, but I'm quite happy to get the Direwolf commission because it looks like a great mech. It's got like a UAC 20 in its I think it's in its right torso. Just a really fun looking mech. They did it for the legendary pack that they released like maybe 2 years ago now. Exactly the same setup as the core Wolf Dragoons. It's 15 mechs, so it kind of acts on the clan system, and again 5 Omnis and 10 like regular Inner Sphere mechs. I also, for Natasha, I decided to do her full like early lance mates. So that's the Marauder, which she actually pilots a Marauder for a time as well. It actually gets taken over eventually by the Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter's a weird topic and thing, but she does. They obviously get another Marauder, and in that, Colin McLaren is in there. He's kind of a famous person within the Black Widow Company, and then we've got Lynn Sheridan in the Crusader, and we've got John Hayes in the Griffin. So that's kind of her core little group of mech warrior pals in the Black Widow Company, and the Black Widow Company are very much like the, no pun intended, the black sheep of the Wolf Dragoons, and they're all a bit crazy. And Natasha Kerensky's like, the best mech pilot ever, or mech warrior ever. So yeah, they'll be fun to do, and I can't just to do them in that like jet black with the red piping. That's going to be quite fun. And then the final bit of the Wolf Dragoons, I'm going to do the Snords Irregulars, and I really, really love the Snords Irregulars. I particularly love one character in here, and that's Rhonda Snord, who is the daughter of Cranston Snord. Rhonda is a complete, for me, one of the real icons of BattleTech. She originally pilots a Shadowhawk, but then she goes on to pilot a Highlander. I think it's called Heavy Metal. It's certainly got heavy metal written on its Gauss rifle, but it's like a pink mech that's got like speakers attached to the side of it that blare out like old Elvis songs. I mean, like peak BattleTech, right? They're a really interesting group as well because they're basically like a treasure hunting group. They are originally parts of the Wolf Dragoons, but they kind of decide. Cranston basically makes a deal with Jamie Wolf where Cranston goes and tries to find like lost tech and things like that. So there's a bit of the Indiana Jones about them. So that's like really fun. Next up, and I think this is the final one. Yes, it is. I'm going to collect the Eridani Lighthorse because it would be rude not to. This is another one that you probably should have more than a company because they are so big. Like for the Grey Death Legion, I want more than a company really because they're so iconic. But for the Eridani Lighthorse, they're so central to the BattleTech experience and narrative. They're an SLDF force that kind of remain behind. They don't go on the Exodus. They stay in the Inner Sphere. And they're there right at the end. They're there during Operation Bulldog. They kind of, put one of the killing blows into to Clan Smoke Jaguar. It's a really important force. I feel a little bit not guilty about this, but I've kept it a bit generic. But that's because they're so big. They don't really have any central characters. They don't have like a Grayson Carlisle or a Morgan Kell. So I've just put some brevet generals and a lieutenant general in there. So that's Nathan L. Armstrong and William Eric Peterson. They're both in an Atlas at one time or another. Then there's, I think, the most interesting character in there, which is Ariana Winston. She's in the Cyclops. And the Orion is at one time is piloted by Lieutenant General Edwin Amis. I've tried to keep that as Star League as possible, apart from obviously the Sagittaire. We are getting the Eridani Lighthorse box set as well, and the Sagittaire comes in there, so it has to go to them, really. It's a very late mech, though. It's a 3063 mech, so it's kind of cutting edge tech, and it's at the very end of the time frame that I play BattleTech in. So that's it. That hopefully gives some kind of frame on what you can do. Obviously, a lot there is taken from the inspiration with the box sets that we are getting, like with the Eridani Lighthorse, the Kellhounds, things like that. I'd advise that, I mean, you probably don't want to do what I'm doing in terms of the volume of stuff, because that's a lot and it's going to cost quite a bit of money, I think. But if you're just interested in doing a company, the reason why I've done that is you don't necessarily just have to do the box as is in the colour of the mechs. Like for instance, I'm going to do the Snords Irregulars here. They're really fun, they're really interesting. There are loads of mercenary units in BattleTech, some really fun ones. I mean, I think I'm doing all the real fun ones here. There are others as well that I'd like to do, but kind of, time and space permit, I've got to make a choice. So have a think about that. Now's a really good time to think about it as well. It's also important to note that the Kickstarter is not finalised and it's not being published yet. So we have no idea what else they might do. I might have to change my plans. They may, for instance, release a Snords Irregulars box set that they just haven't announced yet. And then I'm like, oh, it's got a Highlander in there and it's got a specific pose that, that Rhonda Snord uses. And I really want that now, so I'm going to have to get it. So things may change. Obviously, if they do change, when the Kickstarter's announced, no doubt I'll do a video about it, and then I'll probably do a little bit more on the, on the force creation like I've done here. Anyway, hopefully that sparked some thoughts off in your head in terms of where you want to go and the direction you want to go in the Kickstarter. Very exciting times. The box art for the new for the mercenary units looks absolutely beautiful. So I'm super excited to get that. It's going to be quite a time away though, because I guess that we will get announcements on like the specifics of the Kickstarter over the next 6 weeks. I'm then guessing we'll be able to sign up to the Kickstarter in probably August, September. Now, if the form of the previous Kickstarter is anything to go by, I think we all need to kind of temper expectations a little bit. No doubt Catalyst will say we think it will get to people in the spring of 2023. I think that would be highly unlikely. I think we're probably more looking at autumn 2023. But as long as you're patient and you accept that shipping is in a nightmare situation, and the whole global world as we know it, or the globalization element of business, is really in a different cycle right now. Like the first cycle is ended, the second cycle of globalization is beginning, which is probably going to look a lot different to how we are previously used to it. And I think everything's going to be affected. It's not just games, obviously. Everything in terms of pharmaceuticals, food, everything's going to start having to change because of the way the world is changing. So there we go. So we're not immune to that, obviously, and it is a game after all. So it's not like it's not insulin for diabetics or anything like that we're talking about, where if people don't get it they die. They are just toys. So if you have to wait a few more months for it, then I'm sure we can all live with that. Anyway, I'll leave that there. So thank you very much for watching, and I will hopefully catch you again next time.